Hello, members. This is Tom Morrison right here from Jacksonville, Florida at the MTI headquarters. We'd love to see you today on Heat Treat Live. Today, we're going to be talking about emerging technologies and disruption in the heat treat world. Every industry out there in manufacturing, doctors, attorneys, cars, you name it, is struggling with how to deal with the disruption that is funneling their way. And the one big thing they're really trying to take advantage of is this chart right here. You can see this is our economic firm. ITR Economics did a webinar not too long ago, 90 minutes, on what is the 2020 growth going to look like versus the 2030s. And you can see the green line here, right here by my finger, that is showing what the economic production and what the economy is going to do for the next 10 years between 2020 and 2030. Now you can see here there's a little blip it's going to take in 22 and 23 of about 18 months. You want to prepare for that, but as you can see, they call it the roaring 20s. It's going to be a ton of business coming your way as manufacturing and demographic shifts really take place. And those that are streamlined, doing their 5 S's, really leaned out and have a streamlined operation and take on those captives if they can, those that do that are going to really win the day and gain from productivity and profit. So, but here's the big thing in this little green line right here is that's a 10-year run. The first 8 years of that between now and 2027, 28, there are no more employees. There's no one to hire. They're all working for people. So where are you going to get that? So it's more important for you to be looking at the things that Mr. Herring and I are going to talk about today with automation and making things more streamlined in your operation. But right before we get to him, we would like to let you know that on the right-hand side of your screen, if you hover below, you'll see a little box that says chat. You can click on that, and the box is going to pop up. And then at the bottom, it says type message here. You can lean in there if you hear anything from us that you want to ask a question about, comment on, or if Dan, you'd really like to inquire about his technical knowledge. He is the heat treat doctor, and everybody knows him. He knows everything about heat treat. He will answer. I'll monitor that, and I'll ask the question to him. What I'd like you to do right now, we love to hear where members are listening from. If you want to just type in there where you're listening from, so that'd be great. So a couple things that's going on with MTI right now that you need to know about. The Technical Standards Committee, a couple of happenings. The Technical Standards Committee met this week, and there is a lot going on with AMS 2750. Huge changes. It was in Committee B today. We're waiting to hear how it turned out there. There's some big implications coming out of that, and you're going to want to be paying attention to that if you're in the aerospace field for sure. So they're also looking at the CQI 9 standard that's supposed to come out early next year, as well as there's some new stuff coming out of the E28 Committee on hardness testing that you're going to pay attention to on differential indentation. So lots of technical stuff going on, especially with NADCAP, and they're on top of that stuff, chaired by Bob Ferry and Ed Engelhart from Solar Atmospheres and Bob Ferry from FPM. So stay tuned to the updates on that stuff. Our Furnaces North America 2020, which will be September 29th through October 2nd. Mr. Herring will be presenting from there next year. It is going to be the kingpin of trade shows and business conferences and technical information next year. You're going to want to mark September 29th to October 2nd on your calendar and be there. It's the largest heat treat show only that's going to be there. It's going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, a great fun city, so do not miss it. Furnaces North America. And then our Yes Management Training Program, the best and absolute best management training program in all of manufacturing. It is. I've seen them all, and MTI has the best training for your leaders or potential leaders in all of manufacturing. The 2020 program, believe it or not, we've never sold it out before October 30th, and we sold out by the end of August. That program is hot and doing well. And so 2020 program is already filled up with 34 students, 34 executives from around the country. So I just want to let everyone know that the 2021 class will be popping through in early March next year. Start identifying who you want to put into this class, because it is changing managers and supervisors, even presidents of companies' lives on a personal basis and a professional basis, and making them just dynamic individuals for their company. So you definitely want to see who you want to have in the 2021 program. So that's all for our MTI happening. So right now, we want to jump into the meat of the matter, which is to be here, talk to this man, Mr. Dan Herring, the heat treat doctor. Dan, say hello to all of MTI.
Hi, guys. How are you? And Tom, it's always a pleasure.
Awesome. So Dan, for anybody, I don't think I know anybody that doesn't know who you are, but you know what? I know there's a fan base that probably is wondering, who is this guy? So take 60 seconds and tell all the heat treat world who Dan Herring is.
Well, I like to stay an enigma if I can, but I'll try to clarify that for everybody. Obviously, my background is in metallurgy and material science, and my little company, the Herring Group, specializes in problem solving and practical solutions to manufacturing problems out there, whether it be in heat treating, whether it be in brazing, or whether it be in sintering and powder metallurgy. So we've got our fingers in a lot of pies, but hopefully people hire us when they run into problems they can't solve themselves or need some direction from a perspective outside their own companies, Tom. That's what we do.
Well, I know you've been with us for a number of years as a consultant for members to tap into as a part of our industry support team. And if any members don't know, if you have a technical or compliance issue that you would love to get Dan's input on, you can easily go out to heattreat.net, MTI's website, and you log in, and in the top there is a Get Connected box. The very first thing on there is Ask the Heat Treat Doctor. You click that, answer the questions. Dan, as soon as you hit submit, Dan gets an email with that information immediately, and he is very responsive within 24 hours of getting back to you and letting you know what his thoughts are on your issue. And I've had so many members tell me they're so glad that they had the access to Dan to take an issue that could have taken them a week to find out, and within a couple of hours they were able to decipher it and get them in the right direction. So use that as an MTI benefit if you have not. So Dan, let's jump into the meat of the matter. Question one. So we're talking about marketplace disruption and heat treating, and when disruption usually comes in the form of emerging technologies, and there's three components to heat treating: materials, processes, and equipment that I think of when you're looking at how things are going to be done in the future. And so what impact are you seeing in both heat treatment and the commercial industry in two really huge areas that people are looking at: electronic cars and additive manufacturing? Dig into how those are going to impact the world of heat treat.
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. First of all, Tom, just as a note, it's certainly my privilege to help the MTI members, and I would encourage, just as you said, that get a hold of me through the MTI website, and I'll be more than happy to help. So it's really my pleasure to do so.
Thanks, Dan.
But yes, when we pull out our crystal balls and we look at what some of these emerging technologies are moving forward and how they'll impact our industry, I will start with electric cars just as a note. I don't probably share the same enthusiasm that many people in the automotive industry do or the environmental industry do about the onset of electric vehicles. Certainly from a technology standpoint, there's no question that the electric car is here and it's here to stay. Battery technology is getting more efficient and more compact all the time. And certainly the environmental impact of the electric car is unquestionable. The difference that I see and what I think is important for MTI members is that until every service station in the world is mandated to have electric charging stations, I just don't see this technology taking off the way it could. I look at it now and I look around and I go to a local shopping mall here in the Chicago area, or I go to certain selected stores, and yes, there's a couple of charging stations that these companies have made available. But the problem is always the fact that you're going to have a limited distance. You're going to be able to travel on one charge.
Right.
And as a result of that, you're going to need to stop and recharge. That doesn't mean you can't knock on some stranger's door and ask to plug in and give them a few dollars for the privilege. But I think in general, you're going to have to see, at least in this country now, you're going to have to see a federally mandated program.
Right.
So yes, I see the push toward electric cars and the impact it's going to have to reduce the number of gears, for example, that are being heat treated a year and things of this nature. But I don't see this taking over the majority of the industry at this point in time, or any time within really, well, let's put it this way. Until it's mandated. Once it's mandated, I think every MTI member better open their eyes and open their ears and get ready. But until it's mandated, I think the growth is going to be slow and steady over the next decade. and maybe peaking out or capping out at maybe 10% of the automotive industry until that mandate comes down. So just food for thought. So it's something I can offer the members is my personal perspective on it.
Well, when I think of electric cars, you know who I feel really are the people that are going to be impacted the most when you really give it thought? You ever got those friends that run gas down to the bottom of the barrel past the light blinking on and off, and they end up on the side of the road and they are able to get AAA, they get a gallon of gas, they go up to the next store and they fill up? That happens in an instant. Electric cars don't fill up with a set of gas instantly. You're just kind of hanging there sitting down. So, and I think that's the other thing is having the ability. I mean, if you do run out of electricity, you've only got 6 minutes left and you got a 20-minute ride. What do you do in that? What do you do with that stuff? And there's going to be people who mismanage that. So there's a lot of unintended consequences that are coming with the electric car for sure. And for me, I've ridden in them and they've opened up the trunks. There's no motors in there. And I'm thinking, where's all the heat treatment in that car? But I think, like you, I think until we see a mandate, I think we're a ways away. But we are in a transitional stage. I do think that heat treaters need to be having the conversations to start to say, what happens if we see a demand in cars, an engine combustion cars going down like this? What do we start doing? And you got to have that conversation sooner than later, just so you're prepared with a strategy.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. We have to prepare for it. It's coming. But I think right now, the way I'd like to summarize the technology is that everyone likes to be on the cutting edge of technology, not on what I like to call the bleeding edge of technology.
Right.
And right now, we just have not advanced the state of the art to the point where it's going to monopolize the industry. It's going to be dictated. There are states like California and others that have very aggressive policy, green policies, etc. But I still think it's going to take a federal mandate to do. Now, by contrast to that, Tom, you have the additive manufacturing world.
Right.
And I look at the additive manufacturing world with a great deal of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
I think this industry has the potential to be a game changer.
Sure.
And one of the things that I would look at that MTI members must be aware of is that this is not about heat treating additive manufacturing parts. There are certain additive manufacturing technologies where annealing or stress relief cycles are needed. But I think MTI members had better pay attention to this technology with the intent of becoming a service provider.
No question.
The idea is the fact that they want to be able to offer the capability to take a manufacturer's design, to prototype it, make prototypes in a small additive manufacturing cell where parts are produced and heat treated all in one.
Right.
And the amount of money that the sheer R&D dollars that's being thrown in this industry or thrown at this industry means it can't help but succeed.
Sure.
And but that's what I see for our members is the fact that we have to offer these services rather than think that our mission is going to be to heat treat the product coming from them.
Right.
All of the major manufacturers, especially those with the jet technology, are looking to put manufacturing cells in place rather than making individual components. And so I see the heat treat shops of the future having areas set aside to actually do additive manufacturing. So I do think that's very disruptive. I think it's going to reduce the amount of parts in the future that are going to be made by what they call subtractive manufacturing, or what we would call machining today.
Right.
So I see this being a real impact player. There's certain technical challenges we have to overcome, but as heat treaters, we roll up our sleeves and we overcome them. So, but I do think this is a game changer. I think this is one of the big disruptive technologies of the future.
Well, you know, what I want to follow up on that, when you look at, if we were to be doing this in 2030, I will almost bet you in 2030, electric cars are a normal thing, and additive manufacturing is a normal process in the like a high production manufacturing. They're going to figure that out. And here's the thing you got to be aware of, heat treaters, looking at me in this camera, is when you look at this economic chart, look at the big red line there. See that big, huge hole? That's between 2030 and 2040. You know, if you're an owner and you're going to be out before them, applaud you, but your team, you need to be preparing your team, because you don't want to have a shrinking market trying to dig out of an economic hole. You need to be having your conversations now on what do we do when the electronic car becomes the norm? How can we begin? Because it takes years to shift your business model. So you need to be talking today, how can we shift that model by 2025 to embrace electric cars, whatever's going to be heat treated in it? And then how do we embrace the additive manufacturing? And Dan, the danger I think that not many people are thinking about with additive manufacturing, I want to repeat this example because it's so worthy, is I went to the Moog Aerospace plant, and we went into their additive manufacturing division. They gave us a nice tour of that. And when I was talking to the gentleman, he was telling us about this part, this huge part. It was one component, but they manufactured 75 different individual parts that became the component, okay? So they send out the 75 components, the numerous heat treaters to heat treat those millions of parts, and they send it out for machining. And then it comes back and they assemble it. Well, guess what they get to do with additive manufacturing? They get to print that part as one component. If you can print the one component, guess what? 74 parts didn't get shipped out for heat treating probably millions of dollars, and it didn't go shipping out for machining. Why? Because they got one component. And then I asked them, I said, so if you can do one component, do you potentially put a couple of furnaces in here because you're managing one part, and you do it in-house? He said, that's part of the conversation. Our industry that was getting millions of dollars just got zero. That's why I think it's so important for you, for the heat treaters, to be having the conversation. Can we tap in the research and development and offer 3D printing, additive manufacturing as a service?
Exactly.
So the manufacturer doesn't get in that business. That's part of our business. So you do the recipe, you 3D print it, heat treat it, maybe machine it, and then send it back to them in one piece. I think that's the danger of people have to look at, is 3D printing is not about more or less heat treating. It's about being able to manufacture components as one solid component when it used to be 10 to 20.
Well, and one last item on that, really, Tom, is the fact that many of these designs can be made honeycomb structures. So not only are you getting the benefit of a single piece construction, but now that piece is significantly less overall weight than is the equivalent machine component.
Right.
So there are tremendous upsides, and I just think that that's something that every MTI member has to be planning, not if I'm going to incorporate it into my business model, but when and where am I going to incorporate it in the business model.
Boy, the taxi industry just did wish they had 10 years ago said, what if we created an app to pick people up? And they snoozed on it, and the Uber and Lyft totally dominate the market nowadays. So it's important that you're having those conversations, members out there. So let's make a shift, Dan. So we were talking about big changes in the heat treating industry, and we're seeing some that are having some great impact on the future. So you gave me a list of some that I want to kind of just throw out at you, and you tell me what your thoughts are on them. So
Sure.
One, with no employees, automation is paramount. Getting product from receiving to shipping with the least amount of human touch is going to be the critical component to succeeding in the future. So the element of CAPT is moving toward automated systems. So talk about that in the future.
Sure. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I've always viewed the commercial heat treat industry, the two things are managing energy and managing labor. Mm-hmm. Those seem to be two big items within our industry. I think the labor component and the type of worker that's coming into the industry in the future, not only the number of workers that are going to be available, but the type of worker that's coming in,
right,
is going to want to use automation. Mm-hmm. A quick example of that is, and I probably shouldn't admit this in a worldwide audience, as they say, but I was in machine shops starting at age 6 because my father was a machinist, and on Saturdays he'd bring me to work with him. And with no particular safety instructions, I may add, other than don't get your fingers caught in the machinery.
Right.
But the idea being the fact that I learned to love to work with my hands.
Yes.
I love the smell of cutting oil and then quench oil later in life. And my next door neighbor was this odd person called a heat treater, a strange combination of things. But anyway, from that perspective, I think the new generation is perhaps less interested in getting their hands dirty on the shop floor than they are controlling the quality of the product being produced.
Right.
So I see automation as being a major component or major addition into the commercial heat treat industry for improved quality control, but better labor management, I think, will be the big driver. I think I want to say this reluctantly, but I believe it to be true. I believe that we as an industry are going to have to adapt to the workforce, where in prior years, the workforce adapted to the industry that they went into.
Correct.
And I think that's a big change. I really do.
Well, automation is going to be the key. I mean, I was in a member plant in August, and we went into a machine where they were controlling it with an Xbox joystick. It was amazing. And so when you put a young person, put that joystick, they already come with some preconceived skill sets because they know how to work the joystick. They just need to know what you push and what you do. So it was amazing to see that happening. And, for me, automation, I think our members need to, when they reach out to at least the older generation, many people think, well, you're trying to replace us. And I think you need to be going a long way to tell your people that automation is not about replacing you. It's about a capacity expansion. The number one thing I hear, Dan, from most people, whether it's heat treating, the wood industry, the housing industry, the number one thing preventing them from bigger throughput and bigger output is having enough labor to push through the demand of the work coming their way. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. So I think that's a good thing. So let's talk about, the second thing you talked about was the evolution of the integral quench furnace. So share a little bit about that.
Sure. And we've always talked, or it's been discussed over the last decade or more, that what we might need one of these days is a integral quench furnace, which isn't what we would think of as the traditional integral quench. Belching flames, if you will, into the room, and looking at, as we called it affectionately, the fire-breathing dragon, if you will.
Right.
There's something that equates fire with heat treating, and it's a basic instinct of man, I suppose. But since we're not talking philosophy, I'll drop that subject. But the idea is the fact that a number of manufacturers, it's not just one, have struggled with ideas of how to combine different technologies into one. How to take a atmosphere heating chamber or atmosphere furnace and combine it with a high pressure gas quench. How to take a vacuum furnace and combine it with an oil quench. How to make flameless heat treating a reality.
Right.
Now, I think that you're going to see a number of people at the upcoming ASM Heat Treat show talking about that. I know that I'm part of a group presenting a paper on one possible solution. There are others to how this is going to be done in the future. But I think that to think that we're just going to have an integral quench furnace for the next 50 years, as
Right.
we've had the previous 50 years or 60 years, is a misconception.
Right.
I think you're going to see a real change to eliminate the open flame in the heat treating shop. And I'm excited about it.
Awesome. So maintenance is a big deal. That's the next item on the agenda is maintenance. So you've got preventative maintenance, but you also have the huge, because we have so much data in the past that we can predict things. The big thing for the future that I'm hearing is predictive maintenance. So share what you feel like the future of maintenance is going to be to keep heat treating the most efficient process and keep downtime as a minimum.
Yeah, and I think there's two or three aspects of it. We are moving from planned preventative maintenance to predictive maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to adapt, and I would encourage every MTI member to look at smart sensors that are capable of being put on the equipment, virtually taking the data from the equipment,
Yep.
sending it to the cloud, computing or comparing it to known values or norms, and then reporting it back to us, if you will.
Right.
There's a number of manufacturers with a number of products that are already starting to do this. It's in its infancy, but it's moving quickly. So I think what you're going to see the maintenance man of the future with is he's going to be armed with information about the health of the equipment in real time as it's running. He's going
Right.
to know that something is starting to vibrate, or something starting to fail, or something starting to overheat, and he can take corrective action on the fly.
Sure.
The second thing I think that's part of this is that I think his connectivity to either the OEM or to a third-party supplier via way of vision systems and other types of devices. Right now, a lot of these are used for gaming,
Yeah.
but I see this really extending over into the heat treat industry, where he can put on a vision device and the people he is talking to in real time can see him working on the problem
Right.
right in front of them. And they can offer suggestions and assistance, and they can understand the problem better than if he sent them an email or tried to describe the problem over the phone. So I see that predictive maintenance, I see that assistance for the guys doing the maintenance to make sure the repair is done properly as the future. And it's the very, very near future.
Right.
It's already here. It's just, we're just not sure of the most effective form in which to adapt it yet.
Well, I mean, you've been in those plants. I mean, you see plants with 10, 20, 30, as many 55 to 60 furnaces, and you got a maintenance department just kind of running around checking every furnace, as opposed to if you could be monitoring all of them, but only going to the ones that the smart sensors and technology is telling you there's something wrong. You make a whole lot more use of your time in that endeavor, getting that done.
And a far more effective use of your time.
Absolutely.
Exactly correct. And what you learn from it is you learn what components have failures in, what the mean time between failure of certain components are.
Right.
And you'll learn this, and you'll have data that you can analyze and say, I better pay attention to replacing that fan in my integral quench furnace every 18 months because I start to see the vibration increasing after that period of time, or some other metric that's being monitored changing or increasing over time. So I think it's going to be very dynamic. I think the maintenance man of the future is going to have one of the easier jobs in the shop, believe it or not.
Right. Well, I look at a furnace kind of like our bodies. If we get preventative maintenance on our bodies, there's less downtime, right? I mean, you go to your physicals and stuff. They tell you things early on. You catch it early, then the impact is lesser. So predictive maintenance, a big deal out there. So let's move on to the next thing. So growth of low temperature processes at the expense of high temperature ones. So dig into that. What does that mean?
Well, sure. I think that one of the things that we've done traditionally in the past is we have a component and we have a design where that component must, for example, be carburized or carbonitrided or processed at more elevated temperatures in heat treating. And today what we're looking at is saying that we don't want to be design limited. We would rather change the design one time and then adapt nitriding, nitrocarburizing as technologies, if the design obviously allows for it, so we can reduce our energy costs, we can reduce our environmental footprint, we can save the wear and the tear on the equipment. So everybody wins, if you will.
Right.
Nitriding and ferritic nitrocarburizing, even austenitic nitrocarburizing to a degree. There's a lot of popularity in those processes right now. A lot of very much a lot of enthusiastic people toward adapting those technologies. And
Right.
I would say to all the MTI members that if you're a carburizing house now, you certainly want to be looking at some of these low temperature processes and what they might be able to do for you, type of thing.
Sure. So let's jump into engineered materials. What's your thoughts on engineered materials?
You know, it's always been, and I have, I love materials. That's my business, if you will. But the problem or the fact is that we always have a balance between the cost of the material
Mm-hmm.
and what that material can do for us in a performance envelope.
Sure.
And as a result of that, we tend to have traditional steels. And I'll talk specifically for here in the States, but this applies worldwide. I think I can say this, that we have materials like 4140, which I call the vanilla ice cream, if you will, of heat treating.
Right.
We have materials like 8620, and these materials have a certain amount of limited hardenability, or they have potential issues with cracking or distortion. And I think that we can engineer or tweak the chemistries of some of these materials to enhance their overall performance. And as a result of that, you're going to see the cost for microalloyed steels, for powder metallurgy grades, continuing to come down and challenge conventional wrought grades, because you're going to get enhanced performance and a more predictable, controllable heat treatment
Right.
as you tweak the chemistry and improve the hardenability of some of these grades, with avoiding, of course, the negative effects that you run into.
But when you look at materials, I look at airplanes. The number one thing there is weight. They want the most cost efficient weight. And then you look at cars, they want to have the most, the leanest cars out there. And there's other industries, I'm sure, that they're looking at steel or metal. And I'm wondering, do you feel there's any disruption going to happen in materials where it goes to another material that's not metal?
Well, and certainly, Tom, that's true. I as you were saying that, I was thinking of a Mrs. Robinson moment where I say to you, plastics or something
Right.
very innovative like this. For younger MTI members, you don't know who Mrs. Robinson is, but The Graduate is a very interesting movie to watch. However, from that standpoint, you're exactly right. Metal matrix composite materials, certain applications of ceramics and plastics in certain areas make a very effective material. I don't want to say compromise, but alternative, if you will. So conventional metals are being challenged by design as much as anything else, to change the face from materials to engineered materials. But we are still going to always have our conventional steels and things of this nature, our conventional aluminum. But keep in mind, and I would give as everyone, all the MTI members have flown on airplanes, as the phrase goes, probably too many times. But look at just the aerospace industry and the movement into away from aluminum fuselages, for example, and the adaptation of more titanium-based components along with carbon-carbon composite materials.
Right.
And that trend is going to nothing but continue. They're doing that for the weight. They're doing that for fuel reduction.
Yep.
And if you've flown on some of these newer planes, especially if you've gone overseas, you wind up reaching your destination after a 10, 12-hour or longer flight, and you suddenly say, gee, I don't feel quite as tired as I was before. That's because the plane did not have to be the cabin didn't have to be pressurized to the same extent that it was before. So all of these change in materials have pretty significant benefits.
So that's why I can't sleep on a plane anymore.
That's one of the reasons.
So the last one in this area of materials and equipment and stuff is modeling and simulation for high pressure gas quenching and stuff. So what's going on in that world?
Yeah, I would say again to everyone listening to this webcast that if you're not using modeling and simulation tools now, either for predicting case steps, predicting hardness profiles, or just starting to look at predicting microstructures with some of these simulators that are out there from a number of vendors, I would certainly encourage you to do so. There's hardenability models and simulators. You can put in a particular steel, like a 4150, for example, and you can determine, do I want to quench that in 2 bar? Do I want to quench that in 6 bar? Do I need to quench that in 10 bar or greater? Without having to go through and trial and error, trying it, seeing it fail, making an adjustment, having it fail again, finally hitting upon the right recipe. Today you can really predict how a material is going to respond to hardenability, for example. So the simulators and real and modeling of quench systems and quench tanks and gas usage and flows, a big area for everyone to pay attention to. It's going to just absolutely explode. It's already exploded, but it's going to really take off.
Well, when you look at that, Dan, I think using data, no matter what you're doing, to predict as much of your business in modeling and simulation and maintenance and everything is vitally important, because the market changes so fast now because we're so interconnected. A change in how a consumer buys a product now can follow up the supply chain and impact the manufacturer in less than a year, when it used to take 5 years for that to happen, because we're so interconnected. Consumers find out about things so fast that they shift. And if you see a downshift in automobile sales, a downshift in medical device sales, a downshift in anything, and you're heat treating that product, you're going to see your demand for that product. And I always look at every business has 2 things: value offered to the customer that creates demand. And what you have to be looking at consistently in your business model is anything going to cause our value to go down, which will cause our demand to go down. If that's happening, you need to look inside your business, whether it's your processes, your operations, your equipment, and figure out what drives value high that can drive demand high so you can maintain your company. So I think what you're talking about, and when you can predict that, waiting till it happens, as you said earlier, running kind of fight or flight, waiting till it happens is too late in today's world. You need to be doing things, talking about it, using modeling and simulations to be able to predict it so that you can really make good actions to stay ahead of the ballgame, because this change is moving fast these days.
Well, absolutely. And one of the other aspects is we are more than ever under the gun to have absolute quality control.
Mm-hmm.
I always look at quality as a post-mortem, meaning that once we analyze a part, we've either done the process right or wrong at that part.
Right.
We don't have any chance to change it on the fly. But if we can turn around and use modeling and simulation and use predictive tools, we know that what the quality is going to be before we start.
Right.
And then we're certainly checking it to confirm that we haven't had any equipment or process-induced variability. But we absolutely know that the quality should be there. The specifications will be met before we start.
Right.
Rather than with our fingers crossed, we hope it's going to come out okay.
Right.
Those days they're in the rear view mirror. They've passed us by a long time ago.
So that leads us, when we're talking about control, the next issue we want to look at is real-time control. So define what real-time control is and how do heat treaters leverage that?
Well, and let me give you an example of that from my own experience. Many years ago, when I was taught the art, not the science of heat treating, but the art of heat treating.
Right.
One of the things I remember being told was never leave the furnace when it's operating. You must always be there.
Right.
And you developed iron kidneys, among other things, so you could You could always be there, whether that cycle was 6 hours long or that cycle was 16 hours long. But you always wanted to be there to watch the equipment, monitor the equipment, and see what's going to happen. But we also had a much larger labor force in those days, and we had the luxury, perhaps, of dedicating one person to one furnace. We just don't have that. We just don't have that scenario today.
Right.
But what we do have is the ability to display in real time all of the furnace parameters on our iPhones or iPads or Samsung Galaxy phones. We have this ability in real time to monitor, and in reality, we also have the ability perhaps to control a piece of equipment. But certainly the ability to look at the processes and look at the equipment running in real time makes a tremendous amount of makes a tremendous impact.
Right.
And whether they be anything as simple as having vision systems that watch the equipment, to again some of these critical components or critical process parameters being monitored by smart sensors that report to us in real time. These are game changers, if you will. So I think from the standpoint of quality, traceability of the product, simplifying the heat treat process that's being run, all of that is going to be improved by that. And the day of sitting there or standing there and monitoring heat treat furnaces every minute of the day is again a thing of the past.
Well, do you think would there be a push towards single piece or small batch processing in the future?
Well, I see that as a trend. I'm not sure from a commercial heat treat standpoint that certainly that's something maybe the captives are more focused on, if you will, than the commercial people are right now. But I will say that I've seen designs out there, for example, to replace press quenching, high pressure gas quenching, replace labor intensive processes with automation or automated facilities. So I think in the ideal world, and think of our induction heating processes, we have the luxury sometimes of heating one part at a time. Dual scanners notwithstanding, but the idea being the fact that ideally we would love to heat treat one part at a time. And if we couldn't heat treat one part at a time, we'd love to be able to heat treat a small batch at a time. And I see this as part of the captives' plans for automation in the future. Whether that carries over into the heat treat shop or not, we're going to see. I think it will, but the degree to which it will is still open in my mind.
Well, it's kind of fun when you go into a heat treat plant and you share the automation story and you encourage people that you really have to automate. And the one thing, and this is in any industry where you're doing different types of processes in it, but they're like, we do so many different things. You can't put in one piece and then turn around and have a robot put in a second piece, because they're vitally different in the process. So what excites me most about this whole conversation is thinking about 2030 and looking back and saying, what did we figure out to automate? And it's going to happen. People are going to figure it out. They're going to get smart. They're going to get some young minds in there to just look and say, how would you make this process happen without a human being involved? And not a human being involved, but how can you take one human being, give them a joystick, and let them monitor 3 furnaces where they used to only monitor 1, so you triple your output? So I think that's the big conversations people need to be having in this process, going back to that capacity expansion, not replacing. So now let's dive in. We got about 16 minutes left. Let's dive into the things that all what we talked about is really great stuff. But what people want to do is, how do we transfer that knowledge of automation, being a service company, providing tip-top heat treating services, to capture a captive's piece of business? And so let's just talk about the real meat of the issue. So let's dive in. When you look at captives and commercials, what do you feel what are some of the big hot points of why a commercial can gravitate and get that captives business?
Well, I think that it starts with trying to look at what is a manufacturing company's core competence.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can say for every captive or every commercial heat treater out there, excuse me, that our core competency is heat treatment.
Right. It's what they do every day.
It's what we do every day. It's what we're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say heat treatment, I probably should say thermal treating, because we're talking about brazing, we're talking about sintering,
Yep.
we're talking about all the thermal processes. But I'll use the generic term heat treating to cover all those. But our core competency is heat treatment. A manufacturing companies, it is not their core competency to heat treat. They may become competent heat treaters. There's a difference. But their core competency is actually manufacturing the product for a given application.
Mm-hmm.
And the pressures that are put on captive heat treaters today to produce the necessary volume of product from their whole manufacturing operation is intense. And I think that we as an industry, we as commercial heat treaters, can offer a service that helps unburden them, if you will, from an area that's really not their core competency. And I think that that's the number one thing to look at. Of course, we can offer things such as cost saving.
Right.
We can reduce the manufacturing plant's carbon footprint. We can improve their environmental impact, if you will. We can do all these things by shifting it from their facilities to our facilities. But I think it's the understanding that we are more than an overflow provider.
Correct.
In other words, there's a stigma that when do I pick up the phone and call my local heat treater? If I've got too much, I need more capacity than I have. I've got overflow. Or I'm having a quality issue, which I can't seem to solve myself, so I call it repairing. But in the meantime, I call my local commercial heat treater.
Right.
And I give the problem to him.
Correct.
Etc. So I think that that we have to focus on what the management at the captive heat treat sites are really concerned about. And they are concerned. Quality is a given in my mind. Quality is not a difference maker here. But I think they're concerned. They put a tremendous amount of pressure on their middle management for production. I think every captive heat treater or captive company I've talked to, and I talk to their heat treat group, they're always under tremendous pressure.
Right.
To keep parts flowing through the operation, because work in process inventories are at a record low. And heaven forbid they have a hiccup in their heat treat department, a piece of equipment goes down, a problem occurs, a load jams up, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because they're not running, as we did many, many years ago, with tremendous excess capacity.
Right.
They're running lean.
Right.
So I think it's the technology we have to offer as an industry, and it's the competency that we have to offer as an industry that is our biggest strengths, if you will.
Right.
And the other thing that I think is important, and again, I may be in the minority on this, but I don't believe so. I'm all about relationship building.
Yep.
I'm not interested in waiting for the phone to ring and a customer call me for the first time. I'm interested in having a relationship with that customer. So my name is programmed in his favorites, if you will, when he picks up the phone. So I'm all about, and the fancy term, I suppose, is strategic alliances.
Right.
But in reality, it couches the word, I've built a relationship of trust and demonstrated performance capability, quality, on-time delivery, all the things that I need to do to maintain the business. And if I've done that, then I become a source for that captive heat treater
Sure.
for more than just some overflow capacity. Or if they're down for 2 weeks to service their equipment, I suddenly get a big influx in business, if you will. It's not that I don't appreciate that or don't want that, but I want steady business from them. I want to be one of their suppliers that they can rely on, if you will, and take the pressure off their manufacturing.
Right.
So fancy words, we can call it economy of scale. We can call it, we have a lot of things we can offer to companies.
Right.
They may not have themselves.
Well, knowledge is power, Dan. And when I think about this graph right here, the green line. Well,
the one that you got upside down?
Right. We're going the wrong way. So the green line, you show that to a manufacturer and show them that production in the economy is going to grow tremendously the next 10 years. So the pressure on middle management is only going to get worse. And so how do you maximize that productivity is to farm out, outsource those pieces that you're not really in the business for, and see if you can't become a like you say, a strategic partner with them. But I think it's what you're saying is about understanding your value you bring as a heat treater to the manufacturer and understand their pain points and how do you marry those two to where they, because what I've learned is there's two things that you need to get a captive to understand. I've heard many say that it's really about control, and control is expensive and overrated. And so once you can get them off the fact of wanting to be in control and then sit down and talk about the actual cost, every heat treater I've talked to that has been able to get captive business effectively has always been able to follow a messaging where they actually got them to sit down and look at their true cost of what it's costing them to do the heat treating in-house. And they say the same thing. They look at me and go, I didn't know we were that close. If I could be that close, I'd rather just let you do it.
Rather than me. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the key. And that's something MTI is going to be looking at hopefully in the next 6 to 8 months is we've always, my vision is always to have a tool that members could go out to our website and take a captive and they start plugging in the general cost of what how many pieces they need, the poundage or whatever. And it has the necessary cost components. And then it would show what it's going to cost per pound or per unit for a commercial heat treater. And it would show you what it's going to cost per pound and per unit for a captive. And it's amazing how I've talked to many that those two are sometimes the same. So it's tools like that where really that's kind of our disruptor for the marketplace, is to help give heat treaters a tool where they can really sell that story hard. So I'm going to agree with you. I think the market, the future is bright for heat treaters, but they got to have the right technology, the right systems, and the right stories out there to help get that business for sure.
And I think there's a couple other components to that too. I think that they have to make some infrastructure investments to show that they have a modern shop, if you will.
Right.
However we define the word modern. But the second thing is that remember that at one point in time, our geographic proximity to our customers was all important.
Sure.
But now, as we've been able to branch out, whether we specialize in distortion control, whether we specialize in tackling the difficult to tackle jobs,
yep,
whether we specialize in large one-of-a-kind parts or small high volume production, if you will. We are becoming, and I think that everyone on this call should think about this, we want to look at our shops as being centers of excellence. We're not heat treaters. We're centers, and I think this is trademarked somewhere, but centers for heat treating excellence, if you will. It reminds me of something, I won't mention WPI by name, but But I think each one of our shops has to look at themselves and promote the fact that they're a center for excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And the stigma of being just a heat treater has to be changed from, oh, I'm there if and when you need me,
Right.
to I have the latest technology, I have the latest thinking, I have the latest understanding of where the industry is going. I have an intimate understanding of your business, Mr. Captive.
Right.
So I can be this center of excellence for you. I think that's something we have to tackle a great deal.
Right. I
Uh,
agree.
and then, of course, we have, oftentimes I think of, again, I'm a great movie buff, so I apologize to everyone on the call for this, but Clint Eastwood had a famous line in one of his movies that said, a man has to know his limitations. And I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to turn the spotlight on our own individual companies and on our industry to say, what are the barriers? What are preventing us from not getting a larger market share, but actually dominating the industry in which we serve?
Right.
And I think, we have to control our energy costs, obviously. We have to manage our what we capitalize versus what we expense. So when it comes to fixturing and alloy usage and things like this, we have to look at it and say, what are the most cost-effective alloys to keep me up and running, to keep unexpected problems from occurring. We have to also, within our centers of excellence, we have to be willing to work with our customers. I hesitate to use the word research and development.
Right.
But I would rather say that we have to run controlled tests for our customers.
Yeah.
And work with them on product development. Be the source for that. Because if we are, then we're going to be rewarded with business when we develop their recipes and develop their cycles, and they've structured their product around our costs.
Right.
Rather than us trying to meet some artificially generated cost, which may or may not be accurate.
Right.
So the barriers for us, although they're not many, can be significant. The other barrier that I think is something we are overcoming, and this is not a plug for your MTI online courses, but it is. I think we do an excellent job of education.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that is a differentiator.
Right.
Most captive heat treat shops, although they're interested in educating their employees, don't always put forth the time, money, or energy to do that.
Right.
Whereas we can demonstrate, again, as part of our centers for excellence, we can demonstrate that education isn't a continuing education.
Right.
Is an integral part of how we're preparing to service our customers. That our workforce is the most highly educated. And that education may be on-the-job training. It may be education on controls.
Mm-hmm.
It may be education on smart devices, if you will.
Right.
Or it might be the ABCs of heat treatment.
Right.
But I think that educational component, that willingness to do testing, and I'm not saying we do it for free, but willing to get involved in development programs with our captive companies.
Mm-hmm.
These are all barriers that we can overcome.
Right.
And we can demonstrate expertise and make it even simpler. I know some of those are soft costs, but we make it even simpler for customers to say, not that I maybe want to go to ABC Heat Treat Company, but I must go to ABC Heat Treat.
Right.
They are the experts, if you will, in what we're doing.
Well, you know, Dan, that's what I love about coming into work every day for the Metal Treating Institute, because we are their center of excellence. When you look at, they have access to you for technical support. They have access to a group purchasing program on energy to lower energy costs. They have access to manufacturers' leading management training program to give them the best in executives to manage their departments. They have the best online training to help their people have the technical expertise they need to reduce error rates and work better and not be micromanaged so much. We have incredible national meetings where people can come together and get perspectives of how industry's changing. So we have an online app and mobile app where people can connect in 24/7 to find out, where's that MSDS form I have? Have anybody ever heard of this idea? Is anybody, where have you found this specification at? And the work of our technical standards committee. That is what I love every day. When I say to people that you're not just strong, you're MTI strong, I say it with all my heart, because I see literally every single day how we're impacting a heat treater's ability to be the most competitive force in the marketplace around the country. And it's exciting. And anybody that's not a member, in my opinion, is truly operating at a competitive disadvantage, because they're not tapping in to the things that make them great so they can focus in. Because here's what I tell people: your customer is always someone else's prospect. So if you're trying to sit there and look at the Henry Hyde energy markets and stuff and buy gas, good for you, but your competitor is in your customer space saying, we can do it better than you. Why? Because we outsource our gas buying, and we're going to focus on you. So that's why I think it's important for every heat treat company or any industry. You need to look at what resources you have at your fingertips and let people that specialize in those things do that for you, so you can focus on one thing. Because the one thing they used to say cash is king, but trust me, from 2019 on, customer service is king. And how you treat that customer is going to dictate everything. It doesn't matter how you do you do your processes. If you don't treat the customer and cater to them enough, everyone's going to know about it, because we're so connected. So it's important that you tap into the resources around you that MTI provides and any other group that provides you, and specifically captives, they should be outsourcing as much as their heat treating as possible, so they can focus on their core competency and their customer, which is kind of what we've been talking about this entire thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I would add one more word to the conversation, and that is communication.
Absolutely.
It's not that we want to just brag about how good we are, but we have to communicate to our customers all of the things you've just talked about and more. This demonstrates our competence in our field of expertise.
Right.
I think we have to get the message out to all levels of management, but especially senior management in many of these companies, that you're not just dealing with a supplier.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a highly qualified supplier who has a continuous improvement program second to none in the industry.
Sure.
And I think that message has to be driven home as part of a whole package to communicate. And I think as a result of that, we're going to capture more market share.
I agree.
I think the barriers are not insurmountable. I think that I can say this with candor and honesty. I don't understand the millennials. I'm struggling with that. But as a business owner, we have to understand them. We have to take the time to understand them.
Right.
And we have to understand that that's our labor force in the future. And how are we going to keep them energized and enthusiastic? And I'll close with just an example of something. And I'm not trying to brag when I say this. It's just an interesting side note.
Right.
But I'm working with a couple of the grandsons on rebuilding some cars. And trust me, I'm not doing the majority of the work. The 16 and 13-year-old are.
Right.
And they are doing, with their father's supervision, some really excellent work. They're learning by trial and error. But the idea being the fact that we need more millennials to get their hands dirty. We
Mm-hmm.
need more of them to try to say, why is it important to install the engine bolts first rather than last?
Right.
Things of this nature. So as a result of some of this, we have to work with the up and coming millennials.
Mm-hmm.
We have to capture them early on to ensure that they work in our industry
Right.
and not in another industry. And I
Right.
think that's also kind of as a final thought from my end, I think that's important as well.
Well, I think those are good thoughts, and I think we're going to all be okay in that endeavor, because I always remember what people were saying about us when we were in our 20s, and a lot of it's the same stuff. And then we hit our 30s and had a mortgage, a family, and everything got better, and we matured. So I'm really excited about the millennials. They're probably one of the the smartest technology-wise in our history. So I think there's a lot of hope there. But Dan, we ran a couple minutes over. Thanks, members, for your time. Dan, thank you very much for your knowledge of this industry and being a part of MTI. Members, mark your calendar for October 10th at 2 o'clock for the next edition of Heat Treat Live. We're actually going to have 2 heat treaters who have been fairly successful at bringing on captive business and capturing it. And they're going to share with you the inside story about how you can connect with captives and tell the story so that they want to give you their business and have a chance at getting that. So thank you so much for your attendance today. You're not just strong, but you're MTI strong, my friends. We'll see you soon. Have a great day. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.